great to be here. What I want to cover a little bit today is really the 3 C's of chatbots as I see it. My name is Guy Gadney. I'm CEO of Charisma. And what I want to talk about today is a bit about the past, which is important to be able to ground what is going on in some element of history, the present of where we are now, and a little look at the future of chatbots and how the 3 C's of character, context, and conversation here are the key pillars the virtual characters and digital humans need to have today to meet the brand requirements that we're seeing in the market. So in the beginning, we had computers, and generally they were good things. We as humans used them to speed up our work, to solve complex problems, and to control systems. However, this was politically on a global scale at the height of the Cold War, and it was noticed that if these computers were destroyed, then a country's infrastructure would be equally damaged. So, as many of you know, a combination of American academia and the military launched ARPANET as a way to connect these computers at Pentagon-funded research institutions over telephone lines. Purpose was to create a network without a central core so that it could survive any sort of attack and keep communications alive for all of us. Now, this was back in 1969, and by 1974, on its 5th anniversary around September, which funnily enough is around my birthday, but completely uncoincidental, or it is completely coincidental rather, this is what the network looked like across the US, with points of presence running across all of the US. And in essence, this is the same form that the internet looks like today, but on a much larger and global scale, as you might imagine. Naturally, as this exotic network started to grow, it captured the imagination of Hollywood. And many of you may recognize this 1984 movie, War Games, which highlighted the potential problem of networked infrastructures, namely here where a teenager hacks the nuclear control network and thinks it's a video game. Spoiler alert, leads to some very tense images of the Pentagon center tracking missiles around, as reality is starting to be confused a little bit with digital world. But as with so much art and science fiction, life imitates it. And the line here from the movie here perhaps indicates some of the concerns that we have with advances in AI being trained on zero-sum game situations, which is obviously a bit of a challenge as we move forward with AI in this much bigger world. Now, where does this all leave us with chatbots? Because actually, before all of that was going on, the first chatbot was released. In 1966, 3 years before the internet. Eliza not only broke new grounds in the strange habit of giving chatbots female names, but also broke new grounds in believability. Eliza was not only a chatbot, but was actually a Rogerian psychotherapist. And while Eliza did not formally pass the Turing test in the sense that we all know it, and Stefan referenced earlier, users did suspend their disbelief. And they suspended their disbelief so readily that it troubled its creator, Joseph Weissenbaum, because he intended Eliza to be a mere caricature of human conversation. And yet, suddenly, users were confiding their most profound thoughts in Eliza. We must not forget that passing the Turing test and people believing digital characters or the chatbots we create are 2 completely different things. One is a test, and the other is a willing suspension of disbelief by our audiences. And in this talk, this will be one of the themes to cover today. We need to build digital characters responsibly, not in order for people to believe them, but because it is likely that they will. So in the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, experiments continued to emerge, and interestingly, these all had quite quirky personalities. And they had character until the 2000s and arguably 2010s, when the emergence of the chatbot as an informational interface emerged, powered perhaps not surprisingly by the large tech companies. IBM's Watson made a brief foray into the entertainment world, appearing on Jeopardy, before disappearing back into a sea of data and joining Alexa, Cortana, Siri, and Google now as really information-focused entities. But in the 2000s, we saw another tide starting to rise, the metaverse. Here is a picture of some islands we built in Second Life for Accenture. In this proto-metaverse, we added a concierge character who you can see sitting behind the desk here on the screen, who welcomed visitors to the Accenture Islands. Now, surprisingly, what we found is that people started talking to it, and they wanted to engage. What they wanted to do was stop in the world and hang out, do things, talk to people. And I think one of the key lessons that we learned from the work we did building in Second Life was that if you walk into an empty space, you are likely to be in there for a few seconds, and I'll cover this a little bit later. However, if there's something going on, something engaging, whether it's an event that you're hosting, maybe a little bit like today, or indeed inbuilt games in the metaverse, or more importantly, some form of digital human who you can immediately talk to and engage with, then that engagement level between the user, between the consumer and that location in the metaverse is going to increase substantially. So what we did is we then thought, okay, this is interesting. What sort of character would be emotionally engaging that we could create? So what we did, I'll move on from here, was we then moved on to a chat bot which was text only, and we thought, as humans, who do we engage with most emotionally? So we created the perfect boyfriend and the perfect girlfriend. And those were text chat bots that sat on 2 magazine websites in Australia and were powered by a system called My Cyber Twin that some of you may know. It was then acquired by IBM and formed part of Watson. And what was astonishing about that was the level of engagement that we got. So the average session time for each of these, just text chatting, was about half an hour, 30 minutes. And some session times were running for 6 hours, astonishingly long engagement. Now, of course, as a lot of you know, we could see the results of these. We could see what people were saying. And that gives a real insight and gave us a real insight into how people wanted to engage with that. And there were 2 learnings that we took away from it. One, people just want to be listened to, feel that they're being listened to. And 2, they really are keen to have some form of direction in their chat. Now, number 1 was easy because it was much like Eliza and the concept of the psychotherapist. A lot of the dialogue that was being designed was created to generate a level of empathy between the user and Chloe, who was the name of the of the perfect girlfriend. And it slips my mind suddenly who the name of the boyfriend was. The core focus of the conversation was around listening and being empathetic. And I think that was a real driver. However, the bit that was missing was the second piece, which there was no direction of flow for the conversation. So what we wanted to do after that was to explore powerful characters as well as empathetic ones. And in this one, we swung the pendulum a little bit darker into a project called The Suspect. And we layered a level of story over this project. And the story was very simple. Here's a character who has handed himself into a police station. He's committed some crime, something unspeakable, and he will only talk to you. And very importantly in this project, we wanted to cast the audiences inside the story talking to this character. It was not that they were role-playing a detective inspector or had some sort of game character that they were adopting. It was very much you and your a battle of wits between you and this character. And at this point, there was an interesting piece of research that we did, which was, should we cast people in as themselves, or should we cast people in as a sort of role playing? And the answer we came out with was through a particular test we did at one moment, where in our office we had a big wall down one side of the office. And the other side of that wall, we sat the writer who was role-playing the role of the suspect. And then we got one of our guys who very much a game player, very much immersed in the space, very difficult to please, to role play it. And to test the scenario, but not role play it as a detective, but to play as himself. And that particular chat session lasted from memory, 45 minutes. We thought, gosh, that's a significant amount of time that's spent engaging with this character. And then we printed out the dialogue from that particular conversation, and it was just 1.5 sides of paper. And what that showed us clearly was that this was an experience in which he was thinking about it. It was much slower than a quick, in-out question and answer session. He really felt immersed in the story. It really felt a connection with the experience that we were creating. So we then realized, though, that the addition of a story to this required a completely different interface. And it required an interface which was not to get people in and out of the conversation quickly, but was to keep people in the conversation for a long period of time. And that was the genesis of Charisma, whose interface you can see here. Marcus Winter was our suspect character. And you can see here his first line, "Thanks for coming." We can see the conversation not only just between one character, but very importantly, we want two characters in here. We want to be able to put you as a consumer, as a member of the audience, into an experience where there is tension already between two characters, or at least there's a relationship between them, because that way you will start to feel more immersed. And again, as you can see, this starts to become a lot more relevant as we head into metaverses. So in this, what you've just seen with this is not only that we can do multiple characters, but also there's an element of there's an emotion engine in here. So if you say something whose sentiment is negative, you will make Marcus feel a sense of anger. If you confide in him, there will be trust, there will be happiness, and that then influences the rest of the experience as we go through. Equally, as you saw there, we have the concept of subplots, as many people do, where if someone says something completely out of that branch, Charisma has an element of handling that on the side, which allows for that more natural piece. So if the player says, what's your favorite fruit, then we have that support there. And very importantly, both from a storytelling perspective and a graph perspective, the gameplay elements of memory and these gates that are brought in from our experience in designing video games, funnily enough, allow that element of quiz, of challenge to be put into a conversation. So in the suspect, for example, he asks you who your favorite family member is. We check that, validate it as a name, and then remember it so that it forms part of that story and recall further down the track. And then, as you can see here, we adapt the concept of the gate so that it matches those moves. And importantly, what this does is take the experience out of that standard sort of question and answer, very quick in and out, that we see used for current call centers, into something that's a lot more emotionally engaging. And here is the playthrough, if you like, the results of making those changes that you saw in the graph, all in real time. And of course, vitally, the analytics to see on how well each branch is performing. So again, in real time, you're able to see, is the consumer going down the pathway that the writer intended? The other key point that I think is very important for all of us now is that the conversational design of chatbots needs to be put into the hands of empowered writers whose core skill set from working in, let's say, the TV, movie, or video games industries can design characters that we feel empathy with. And that for us was critical. So very early on, as we're designing the platform, we took it through 4 different writers' labs. And these were 2-day workshops where writers from the video games industry, from immersive theatre, from TV, all came in to experiment, to learn about conversation design and how stories can be told in conversation design, but also to help influence what we could deliver as part of the technology. Now, of course, the TV, movie, and video games industries themselves are now at a pivotal nexus where the introduction of things like virtual production, which has been massively accelerated during the pandemic, and games engines, as we see in Decentraland, in metaverses like Fortnite, are enabling incredibly high quality visuals to come alive dynamically. This is a short preview of a project we did with Warner Brothers on the CGI model from the Justice League Steppenwolf. So again, taking this very much out of standard chatbot realm and running a character that was the CGI model from the silver screen, and making him sort of metaverse ready for characters so that you could enter his universe for better or for worse.
I am Steppenwolf, and you look scared. Are you scared, human?
You don't scare me, Steppenwolf.
Bravado in the face of threat. It is courageous, but with you it's fake. You already know who I am. I have broken 100,000 worlds in Darkseid's name, and soon I will break the Earth. But there is something in my way. I am looking for a suitable human to infiltrate our enemies from the inside.
Okay.
Okay. Is that all you can think of? Now, tell me. Does having a purpose appeal to you?
Do I want a purpose? Yeah, I guess so.
A human with actual ambition. You outclass most of your kind.
So let's leave Steppenwolf there. Important to notice, by the way, that is now, that demonstration is in the Unreal Engine, powered by Epic. We were fortunate enough to have their support from a mega grant to be able to connect our Charisma chatbot system into Unreal Engine, and not only power the speech, but also power the animation that you saw there. So in the graph, we're listening to what the player says, providing Steppenwolf's response using a number of different text-to-speech partners, and also powering that performance. So as he takes the axe and sort of points at the camera, that is triggered and choreographed by the conversation designer, by the writer in the system. However, that's, so we've gone into the sort of big, powerful characters, but as you know, there are use cases which are a lot more sensitive. And in this example, working with the University of Ulster, we co-produced a simulation that allows parents with autistic children, how better to understand their child's behaviors and develop coping strategies and appropriate interventions. So,
hey, Dad, can I watch TV?
Okay, but after the show ends, it's time for bed.
Well done. You gave Ben a prompt about what should happen after the TV show ends. This will help with the transition between watching television and going to bed.
So this for us is a natural way of extending, of creating safe spaces for people to practice conversations, whether in any forms of simulation or training, whether it's work-based bias or negotiation, conflict resolution, or simply onboarding a new employee into a company's culture. the idea of simulating natural real-world conversations, duplicating them, replicating them, and then have people play through as a training exercise starts to show how important it is to have this level of creativity in conversation design. And then, of course, there's a multi-billion-dollar education market. As a bit of inspiration, this is a project we brought to life, applying Shakespeare to conversation for the teenage market. So Will Play is the project which places the students inside the play of Romeo and Juliet, bringing those characters to life so that the students can understand the motivations and storyline almost from within the story itself. And you can see that the interface here, it sort of mirrors a lot of social media platforms that the students are going to be used to. And imagine if all texts could be like this, with legends like Einstein teaching kids their physics, or Lincoln teaching politics, Ada Lovelace teaching math, where we have charismatic teachers we like, of course, we learn so much faster. And finally, to cover a little bit of the future, as I was saying, and looking at mega grants now, Metahumans from Epic Games.
Fantastic.
So this is vital. I think as we start to look at the key pillars that have happened over the last few years in the world that we all operate in. Yes, Alexa as a piece of hardware was vital and a key sort of movement point. Because prior to that, we mustn't forget, as consumers, we really weren't that tuned to speaking to computer hardware. And that then changed our behavior. Now, when Epic Games launched Metahumans, what it did was it inspired the video games industry, I believe, to start to look at their characters a lot more. And take characters which normally use verbs that are sort of very video game centric, like run, jump, hit, up into something which is a little bit more Hollywood, which is more emotional, like make them laugh, make them cry. And that might be for me, a key moment where the industry just turned slightly and started to look at the design of these characters and the engagement of these characters into creating characters that we want to spend time with and want to engage with. And of course, with the rise of metaverses, not least, hopefully a lot of you will recognize this, these are the persistent worlds. And as I was alluding to before, it's vital that we populate these with believable, empathetic virtual characters. If we do not, then the lessons we learned from Second Life are that people will drop in and out very quickly. And if we put virtual characters into these metaverses, a couple of magical things will happen. One is that there will always be someone to talk to, even if it's a short conversation. And this means you will stay in the world for a few vital more minutes. And in those vital minutes, the likelihood of another real person arriving increases, and then a community forms. So the role of these characters in metaverses is vital. And of course, relationships can be built. What we found with Second Life and with the perfect boyfriend, perfect girlfriend, what we found with all of our characters and what Joseph Weissenbaum found with Eliza is that we want to talk as humans. So a well-scripted character who has interesting things to say and who listens to you and reacts in human ways will not only keep people engaged in a single session, but will keep people coming back. And then additionally, the addition of a narrative to the characters, a backstory, motivation, missions, and a hint of gameplay gives direction to the conversation. And this brings tension, pace, believability, and entertainment. And the belief and the benefit of this is that your audiences will then start talking about the experience in the same way we talk about a movie, a game, or a TV series. And in this example, you can see we have two characters powered by charisma talking to each other, and then you drop in and you're coming into that dialogue between two existing characters I was talking about. So before we wrap up, and please start thinking about questions in that you can ask straight away, because I would love to share sort of everything that we've learned, and hopefully it's useful to you. Here are the top 3 takeaways that we're seeing from our perspective at Charisma. One is that current major the tech systems were created to answer questions, they were created to match the core business of the tech companies that created them. So Google, is matching a search engine. Amazon is matching a retail company. Others are matching their own systems. And they deviated from the pioneering character work of Eliza and others. As mainstream customers become more used to interacting with these characters, so they want them to be more lifelike. 2, context makes the conversation relevant to us, not just in a call center, but in any immersive experience where we value engagement. Because without context, a virtual character is a dialogue-based search engine. What we want from characters is something deeper and something richer. And this, of course, is now possible. And lastly, these conversations are how we communicate as humans. So if we are building representations of humanity as virtual characters in metaverses, we need to get the conversations right. And this means drawing on storytelling techniques, going back millennia, we argue with Charisma. It means drawing on psychology, on negotiation skills and gameplay to make experiences that customers will enjoy, relate to, and then return to over and over again. And finally, above all, it's time to think about chatbots, we think, in more creative terms. Because as we head towards more immersive 3D environments like metaverses, and as brands get closer to their customers, so we will need to make these characters stronger, more real, and more aware of the needs of their audiences. So thank you very much for your time today. It is an absolute pleasure and an honor to kick off this conference, and let me now open this up to questions, which I'm happy to take. And Stefan, maybe you could help moderate as they come through.
Absolutely. So we're getting some questions here. Beautiful presentation, by the way. I think and you and I talked about this briefly, like the whole idea that one day you're going to be able to watch your favorite book become a movie like Game of Thrones. And then you're going to be able to go to the Game of Thrones metaverse. And they're already building out a lot of these scenes in Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine 4. So they can reuse all that stuff. And you can interact with the characters, open up new plot lines. To me, it's very exciting. So here's one of the questions. How are game use cases different or similar to business use cases?
So I think it's a really good question, and I think that there is a core difference, which is that the business focus for a game is to keep you in the game for a long time. Mm-hmm. Often, the business focus of a chatbot is to answer your question, and almost success is having answered that question and then left it. So that for us is a fundamental difference in the way that you design a conversation, and indeed the technology that sits behind it. Now, to dive into it a little bit further, there are 2 really useful sort of case studies here. One, and let me be the first to mention Ready Player One on this conference. Okay. About where there's metaverse. Sorry, I had to do it. Yeah. There's sort of bingo kudos that I have to take here. Now, for us, Ready Player One was interesting, of course, as it is for a lot of people, both the book and the movie. But the bit that really piqued my interest was where they go into the world of The Shining. Because Stefan, as you were mentioning before, there fundamentally was a book written by Stephen King that then turned into a movie, that then turned into a book again, that then turned into which was about a metaverse, that then turned into a movie. So we have all of this sort of fluidity of narratives in here. And I think the way that they designed that it was designed as an experience was fascinating. But I think fundamental to this is the answer to the question is actually about engagement and the time spent within those. What I hope is that the business world is starting to see that actually the role of chatbots as an ongoing engagement and relationship is will be the business metric of the future, and staying in a long time is a more valuable business metric than getting people in and out as quick as possible.
Hello, guys.
Right.
This is Madhu. Hello, Kane, Stefan.
Hi. Yes. Hi, Madhu. How are you?
Very
So Madhu,
good.
we're almost ready to start our panel. So I think I'm going to take one more or two more questions, and also Guy, you can answer some of the questions here in the chat as well. So one of them was, and I find this interesting: is the gaming industry already starting to implement conversational design?
Yes,
in
sir.
some ways?
Most gaming companies that I see, they do.
Madhu, right now, right now we're interviewing. It's not your turn yet. Hold on. Can you mute your mic?
Yes, absolutely, and you know what, they always have done. So when you go back to the original MUDs, multi-user dungeons, games like The Hobbit from the 80s, you know, there was conversational design in there straight away already with text. As we sort of move forward to, you know, the AAA games that you're seeing at the moment, and I cite things like Red Dead Redemption and indeed Grand Theft Auto, you know, both from Rockstar, those are both fascinating projects. What is different between for where we are now in the games industry and where we will be in, I believe, sort of coming months, is natural language. Because currently the games industry does tend to do button press interactions. We've seen it with Netflix on Bandersnatch and interactive dramas. But with the addition of natural language into this mix, that does change significantly, I think, the level of immersion, which is super exciting. Yeah,
I really like this, and I think it's a very different way to think when it comes to like Hollywood studios having, you know, thinking about bringing their characters to life, and then the engagement even looks different than just watching TV, which is way more passive. So we have about 3 more minutes, so let's take a couple of more questions. So let's see, I'm trying to find the best one. How long does it take?
Let me answer while we're doing that. I'll just answer quickly with Stephen Broadhurst. Thank you for that question,
Yeah.
Stephen. We have a couple of charisma characters in Decentraland at the moment, just in almost like in a closed garage. We haven't taken them out of the garage yet. But do please connect with me, and then I'll let you know the moment that they're out there, so you can talk to them.
Yes, and actually we were, Guy and I were talking about, for the next event, having one of these characters in the Decentraland during the conference, being able to take questions and you being able to have an experience with them while you're at the event. So this is, you know, fingers crossed, something we can do for our next event, is have a live character you can interact with. And here's, I think this might be the last question. How long does it take your team to build a conversational flow? How much variation do you need when you're designing characters like this that are a little bit more rich in experience? What's the effort?
So I can almost give you a direct example for the, you know, an actual numerical answer for this, because we were given the other day the script for a chatbot that will remain, it has to remain not mentioned by name, but it was an entertainment experience, and we were sent the Word document for it. So you could see all of the different sort of structures, but it was written in Word form. That took us an hour to get, you know, all the dialogue in, and another hour to get the logic in. So it's, you know, the whole focus of what we want to do is get this pipeline faster, semi-automated, using the advantages that artificial intelligence provides us, machine learning and NLP specifically, but also by having an interface which is easy for creative people to engage with. Because if you can do that, then the number of people who actually are required on the team to create that particular experience can be refined right down, and then the other people who, you know, can build up around it. Our focus, I would say, is, you know, there's so much work on semi-automating this process, from the animation of characters, which is not our role, very much then but from us to create that brain.
Interesting. And in some sense, and someone, Sarah hit on it, it's maybe it wasn't Sarah, but it's all about community at some point, because it's about, you engaging with these characters, they kind of become part of your community, and then there could be a community of fans around this experience that you're having with digital characters.
Yeah, absolutely. It is that community. One thing I do want to pick up on quickly, and it may be an interesting one to finish on, because I touched on it at the beginning of the presentation, was Daniel's question about, that our decentraland characters were not human. That particular instance was simply they were default. However, I think the piece I was mentioning at the beginning, which is that all of us, and I do urge us all to think about the responsibility of the characters that we are creating, because, and as I said, not because we want people to believe them, but because people will believe them. And we need to then understand how to manage those conversations. I do think, from that perfect boyfriend, perfect girlfriend chatbot, the first thing we said was, "This is not real. This is not a human. This is a chatbot. It's technology. Now go play." And that did two things. One, it stopped people trying to do the Turing test, and they just enjoyed it, which was great.
Yeah.
But two, there was an element of believability, and we did write those, what I call conversational safety nets around the experience, which is that if someone does go down a pathway which may be psychologically sensitive, that we have an answer for it, and we're supporting those. So I think we are, everyone who's at this conference, I think, will understand the responsibilities we have in designing these characters.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Guy. Thanks for being part of the event. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to a great 3 days. Thank you, Stefan, for inviting me. As I said, it's an honor, it's a privilege, and to everyone for being here. I'm looking forward to spending time with you all over the next few days.
Yeah, likewise. All right, we'll give a big round of applause. Thank you.